So, you're applying for a job, university program, or scholarship, whatever, and the powers that be ask you for a recommendation from someone who can attest to your awesomeness. Great! But now you have a problem. Who do you turn to? Of course, there are former employers, coaches, and other folks who can hook you up. But if you're in the middle of your academic career, then turning to a professor, well, that might seem like sort of a shoo-in option for you. And that's cool. For the most part, professors are happy to provide a recommendation, providing they see something worth recommending. But remember, professors are not obligated to write you a recommendation. If I'm being honest, it's really sort of a pain in the ass. So you'll want to make sure that you approach this person in the right way. So with that in mind, here are the steps you should take when asking a professor for a recommendation. First, decide which professor you're going to approach and why. Why this particular professor? You want to make sure that it's someone who has a good understanding of your work and competencies. I mean, you may have really enjoyed that 8-week online survey class with 40 other students and came away with an A, but it's doubtful that the professor really had much of a chance to gauge your abilities, your skills, and so on and so forth beyond the scope of what was required for the class. You want a professor with whom you developed a good working relationship and took a special interest in your development. Took a special interest in your development because you took a special interest in the course, the content, and what the professor had to share. It's kind of like LBJ, the President Johnson, whatever his name was. LBJ said, "The time to make friends is before you need them." You'll want to start thinking now about developing good relationships, good working relationships with your professors. So when the time comes that you need a recommendation, they're going to be there for you. Next, reach out to the individual and ask if they would be willing to write a letter of recommendation. When you do, include the following: the classes you took with the professor, when you took these classes, what you submitted as a final or otherwise notable assignment, and any special projects you may have participated in, such as research or conferences, labs, presentations, things of this nature. After all, if all you did was the bare minimum in terms of coursework, you may not get much of a recommendation. I'm just saying. And remember, truth is, your professor has had hundreds, perhaps even thousands of students. The odds that they're going to remember you based on your name alone, name recognition, well, those odds are pretty slim. They are much more likely to remember the work you did, the ways that you contributed to the class, and things of this nature. These things tell a story, and professors remember stories. Next, you'll want to provide the professor with a context for the recommendation. This should include what the recommendation is for, who's reading it, why you chose to go to this professor specifically, and when the recommendation is due, the due date. Now, a quick note about the due date. Make sure you give the professor at least 1 week, preferably 2 weeks, to write this thing up. I mean, a day or two notice, it sort of feels like a please drop everything you're doing and do this for me sort of thing, and well, that's just not cool. Now, at this point, you'll just need to wait for the professor's response, but when they do agree to write this up, here's what you want to do next. Provide a brief outline of the points you would like them to highlight based on the requirements of the job, the program, whatever, the scholarship that you're applying to. You can even go so far as to send them a simple write-up of your accomplishments and characteristics and so forth, those that you would really like them to highlight. In other words, you're sort of writing the recommendation yourself. Now, when you do this, be cool. You want to be genuine, you want to be factual, and you don't want to just kind of write a whole bunch of hooey because then you're really going to turn the professor off. Now, mind you, once they receive this thing, they're going to go ahead and edit it and so forth, and that's fantastic. That's part of the process. But when you send them this write-up, it's going to make it so much easier for them to respond. And trust me, they're not going to hate you for that. Finally, when they send in the recommendation, follow up and thank them for their support. After all, there was nothing in this for them. They gained nothing in this transaction. They did the work, you get the benefit. So you'll want to call this out and thank them for doing you a solid. Besides, you may need their support again in the future, and you want to make sure that bridge is nice and robust. All right, so there you go. I hope this was helpful. Follow these steps and you're much more likely to get a solid recommendation. All right, that's all I've got for today. Now go off and make some trouble, and we'll talk again soon.